Hey, birthday girl. It's me, Auntie Creeps. Well, we've been friends for nearly a year, and it's been an honor to be friends with such a talented, unique, sensitive, and beautiful lady. Not to mention kind, helpful, always there when you need her, giving, caring. Well, I could go on and on. Anyway, I just wanted to wish you the happiest of birthdays. I hope this one is the best ever, and that all the ones after it is even better than this one, and the one after, if that makes sense. Okay, well, have a wonderful birthday celebrating with the man you love. He is a keeper. So, enjoy this big collab he put together for you. And you know I love you so much. Happy birthday, darling. I hope you enjoy my little contribution. It's called The Perfect Ending, written by Hot Blooded 1988. The man chose the door in the middle and opened it without hesitation. His face instantly twisted into a mask of insanity as the horrors behind the door pulled him in. The end, read Jay out loud. Jay looked to his wife, Lisa, and waited. Well? Asked Jay. Lisa's pretty face crinkled slightly. So, the reader never finds out what's really behind the door? Well, it's scarier for the reader to use their imagination to create their own worst thing possible behind the door, Jay said. I don't know. It just seems like a cop-out never revealing it, Lisa said while putting her hands on her hips. Jay and Lisa were an attractive, successful couple in their late 20s with a group of great friends. It was another couple in the group, David and Gail, that had convinced them to take the 6-week creative writing class downtown. We get to be creative, meet new people, and then we can hit the bars and clubs for after-class drinks and music, Gail had said. I know it's petty, but I want our story this week to be better than David and Gail's story. We can do better, Lisa said as she pressed her shapely body into Jay's body and hugged him from behind. I just wish I knew whether visualizing something terrible was worse than imagining something terrible. The answer to that could determine how we should end the story, Jay said, his brow creased in thought. Suddenly, Jay brightened up a bit. Babe, are you thinking what I'm thinking? Jay asked with a smirk. A bigger smile started to spread across Lisa's face. You read my mind, honey bunny. Let's go. The couple went downstairs from the upper level of their upscale home, holding hands. Oh, I forgot. Did we have Gary's favorite wine for the dinner party we're hosting for his birthday? Jay asked Lisa while opening the cellar door. I picked up 2 bottles yesterday. We're all set for the party, replied Lisa as they both journeyed down the staircase. Once in the cellar, Jay moved aside a metal cabinet using a hidden switch to reveal an industrial-looking metal door. Jay unlocked the door, opened it, and he and Lisa stepped inside and shut the door behind them. Jay flipped on the light switch. Their toy was right where they left it, chained to the wall. The toy cowered down at the approach of the couple. Jay removed the padlock mouth gag from the toy's mouth. You're going to help us with a writing assignment, Toy, said Lisa. That's right, Toy. We want to know if it's more agonizing when you see what's coming or when you have to use your imagination, said Jay, grinning. No more, begged the toy, holding up burned hands whose fingernails had been removed. Honey, grab the blinding mask and the implements of hell. It's going to be a long night of research, Lisa said.
The story of the vampire tree begins in Guadalajara, Mexico. There's a small cemetery in the middle of the city called El Panteón de Belén. Its ancient walls play host to a number of supernatural legends, the most famous of which concerns a huge tree that grows out of one of the graves. According to legend, many years ago, the citizens of Guadalajara were being stalked by a bloodthirsty vampire. The first sign that something was wrong came when they started finding dead animals all over the city. The people were puzzled, and when they examined the corpses, it was discovered that they had all been completely drained of blood. Before long, newborn babies were being attacked in the middle of the night, and their horrified mothers found the infants lying dead in their cribs. Just like the animals before them, all of the blood had been drained from their lifeless bodies. It was clear that a vampire was on the loose. Everyone in the area was terrified, and most people were afraid to venture outdoors after nightfall. There was one group of citizens who were tired of living in constant fear of the vampire. They decided they would put an end to his reign of terror and set about tracking down the fiend. In the dark, early morning hours, another vampire attack was reported. The local citizens were on alert, and a man was seen sulking around in his backyard. He had light-colored eyes and pale white skin. The angry citizens were sure he was to blame for the attacks. They burst into his house and killed him as he lay in his bed, driving a crude wooden stake through his heart. The next morning, they dragged his body to El Panteón de Belén and unceremoniously buried him under thick slabs of concrete, hoping this would prevent him returning from the dead. Months later, they returned to find the concrete slabs were split and broken by a small tree that had grown from the stake that had been thrust into the heart of the vampire. Over time, the tree grew larger and larger, and the locals called it the Tree of the Vampire. To this day, the tree still stands in the middle of the Belén cemetery. They say that if you break off a branch, instead of sap, you'll see blood oozing from the stump. According to the legend, at night you can even see the faces of the vampire's victims in the bark of the tree. The government put a fence around the giant tree to protect it, and with good reason. They say that if that tree dies, the corpse of the vampire will rise from its grave and terrorize the city again.
Test 1, 2. This is James Evans. It's October 11th, 1992. I'm recording this to document the events of the last 8 nights. I'm so tired, but I need to keep going. I need to keep fighting. I don't know how much more of this I can take, with all this sneaking out at night. I hate not sleeping, but as long as those freaking vampires are walking around at night, the city isn't safe. By my count, I've killed over 12 of those bloodsuckers. I do not consider myself a hero. I'm not expecting a medal for this or any of that nonsense. I just got so damn tired of living in fear. It was so horrifying to watch. The way they blend in. The way they move around at night and gather together to feed. Last night I got sloppy. I made a mistake by trying to fight too many of them at once, and one of them even bit me. Thank God I haven't turned yet. I've been cleaning the wound non-stop, and it seems like it's helping, but look, if I do turn, I want you to know what happened. So if you find this tape among my possessions, you'll know the truth. You'll know that I slayed as many of them as I could, and that yes, vampires are real. Not fiction, not Hollywood. They're real. And I hope to God that if I have turned by the time you're hearing this, that well, you'll ram a stake right through my heart and please just make sure to tell my family that Just a moment. Come in.
Good morning, Ethan.
Oh, good morning, Doctor.
I have your pills and your breakfast. Don't forget that we have a 10 o'clock session. I'd like to speak to James again. Tell me, Ethan, is James here right now with us?
No, Doctor. He was, but he left. Maybe he'll be in the session with us if he's ready to talk. Doctor, can I watch TV now?
Okay, just for a few minutes. I'll be back.
Thank you.
Also,
Melanie, more about gel coat.
And police are now calling the recent string of murders of 15 homeless men and women the act of a serial killer. So far, there are no leads, and the motive for the murders is not...
Oh, James. What did you do?
When I was a little girl, my papa lived in an old farmhouse in the upper end of Cleveland County, North Carolina. We used to go visit with him every Saturday. My dad, my mom, my baby brother and I, along with usually several of my dad's brothers, his sister, and their assorted children, would congregate after lunch at Papa's. Us cousins would play together outside, out in the woods, which ran behind my papa's farm and stretched for probably 10 miles to a dirt road, beyond which was an apple orchard and a cattle pasture. This was the early 80s in a rural area, back when kids could take off to the woods for hours and it was okay. We would all have dinner together and then hang out until bedtime for us kids, when we would all head home. At the time, I had just turned 8. My cousin Jay was 6. My brother and Jay's sister were both small toddlers, barely walking. The night in question, Jay and I and our little siblings were the only kids present at Papa's. He and I had spent the day playing in the woods as usual, and out in the yard where Jay was trying out his prized brand new skateboard. After supper, we hung out in the back bedroom watching TV until our parents informed us that it was time to go home. Papa's house had a glassed-in porch, which also served as a laundry room on the front, right outside the kitchen. This porch, because of the way the lot was laid out and the house was built, was fairly tall, and looking out the windows gave you a panoramic and slightly elevated view of the backyard. I would speculate that the porch windows were about 20 feet off the ground, and the backyard sloped away from the porch. The backyard was lit by 2 large lights, one which was mounted on a pole to the left of the yard, the other mounted on the side of Papa's shop, which was to the right. They were very bright, and each lit up a fairly large area. The only real shadowy part of the backyard was the area where a large tree stood, casting a shadow that fell between the shop and the greenhouse, which was to the far left of the yard. It was under this tree that Jay had left his skateboard when we stopped playing to eat supper, and he and I decided that we should go out and get it while our parents were still saying their goodbyes in the kitchen. The Wolfman was in the backyard. We saw him at the same time as soon as we entered the porch. He was man-sized, and he looked exactly like a werewolf from a bad B-movie. He had a shaggy, dark brown wolfman head with long, pointed ears and a lighter brown muzzle. His hands were human-like as best I can remember, though they were covered in dark fur and he had long claws. He was wearing a red and black checkered flannel shirt and blue jeans. I don't remember anything about his feet, whether he had shoes or claws, but his legs were straight, like a person's, not bent backwards like a dog. He was walking back and forth in the yard, almost robot-like or as if he were on a track. I can't really describe it well. It was like his legs were moving a little, but not enough to actually count as walking. It was more like he was gliding, but in a jerky way. His body was human in proportion. He would move from the edge of the light near the greenhouse across to the light near the shop, stopping when he reached the end of the illuminated area and turning around in a strange jerky way and gliding back. His eyes were red and glowed some, like one of those laser lights that you use to tease cats, that color and about that level of brightness. The only time he was out of our sight was when he passed into the shadowed area of the tree. He seemed to be showing off for us, wanting us to see him. Or at least that's what it felt like. The feeling that he carried with him was of overwhelming malevolence. I felt like he knew we were there and could see us watching and feel that we were afraid, and he was glad. Not sure if that makes sense, but it was what I felt at the time. Dread and fear, and like he was aware of us and doing what he was doing on purpose to scare us. Of course, we freaked out and started screaming for our parents. And of course, once they all rushed out onto the porch, only to hear us hysterical because the wolfman was in the backyard, they said the usual parent thing about overactive imagination and too much Scooby-Doo. Because even though he was there walking back and forth right in front of them, and we could both see him, none of the adults present could. I remember pointing and saying, "It's out there!" and being really frustrated because they couldn't see it. Finally, my dad, determined to put an end to the nonsense, announced that he was going to go out to the yard and get Jay's skateboard from under the tree. We tried to stop him, but he went anyway. At the time, the wolfman was still doing his strange gliding walk back and forth. When my dad opened the porch door and hit the steps that led from the porch to the yard, he triggered the motion sensor light which was on the corner of the porch awning, lighting up the shadowed tree area. Just before this happened, the wolfman had stepped into that shadowy area and disappeared from view in the dark. When the light came on, lighting up the tree area, the wolfman was just gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, as they say. We never saw him again, though we became mildly obsessed with werewolves for a while after that and started hoarding silver in case we needed to make silver bullets. When you are a child, it's pretty amazing what you can consider normal. We were scared at the time it happened, but it's like afterwards, it didn't feel completely real because it was so bizarre, and we sort of made a game out of it. A few weird things happened to us in the woods after that, but nothing that could be considered paranormal beyond doubt, and nothing like seeing the Wolfman. Years passed, but I always wondered about what we saw that night. My cousin Jay forgot about it altogether. I asked him about it just a few months ago, and he didn't remember it at all. What really brought it back to my memory was the story in Linda Godfrey's Real Wolfman about the girl who saw the hitchhiking werewolf wearing clothes. Before that, I'd never seen a serious report of a canine or lupin humanoid wearing clothes in any publication. I don't often tell anyone about the Wolfman we saw, because it sounds so completely crazy. Of course, my parents and Jay's parents never for 1 second believed we saw anything. I don't fully know the history of the land around Pawpaws. I know that there were lots of Catawba Indians in that area before colonial times, and that there are several strange formations in that part of the county that people claim are Indian mounds, though none of them seem to be officially recognized as such. There have been several Bigfoot flaps in that county as well, and there are black panthers there. I have seen both black and tan panthers, as has my father and many hunters he knows, though they are not, in my opinion, anything supernatural, just regular animals. I have no idea, to this day, what it was we saw in the backyard. I find it hard to believe that it was actually a werewolf, but I feel like it was something paranormal. Seeing it caused me to have a lifelong interest in cryptozoology and Fortean phenomenon. I've thought a lot about it, and I sort of feel like John Keel was right when he suggested that there is something out there that messes with us, just because it can. Like maybe something that wanted to be scary, and knew that a stereotypical werewolf would frighten some little kids. I've even wondered if it could have been someone dressed in a costume playing a prank, but that wouldn't explain the weird gliding, unnatural way it moved, or the way it was able to disappear so fast, or the fact that apparently 5 adults couldn't see it, even though 2 kids could. Just thought that this might interest you because of the novelty. It sounds so out there and frankly made up that I doubt anyone would believe it anyway. I have told maybe 4 people my entire life about it, including my ex-husband who did not believe me. I have never even mentioned it to my current husband because it's just so weird. I would, however, be interested to know if anyone else out there has experienced anything similar. Either a werewolf-type form dressed in clothing, or something that they felt was something pretending to be something that it really was not. For whatever reason, I feel strongly that this is what was happening. I appreciate you taking the time to read this. Good luck with your research.
Good evening. My name is Raener Lewington. I am a dark fiction author, as I believe they mentioned before, and I write horror usually. However, there is always a bit of truth hidden away in my stories, no matter how minute or impossible it may seem at first. And today, I will share with you a personal, horrific experience of mine that I still try and grapple with to this day. This story is simply called Sleep Paralysis, to describe what it was that I went through, or what I believe, rather, that I went through, and I hope you enjoy. I never really talked much about this experience, as I never felt that many people would believe me if I ever told them the truth. I admit to having hallucinations frequently, and I do admit to hearing voices occasionally, but they were nothing like this. This happened to me about 5 years ago. Most people don't believe that this is possible, but there is some truth to the experience. People sometimes undergo a condition where they fall into a light sleep, but end up waking during the phase of sleep where your body freezes itself into place and awake in a condition known as sleep paralysis. Many people report experiencing strange phenomena whenever they awake during sleep paralysis, and I was no different. During a night where I had very little sleep, I woke up for some reason because I was incapable of movement. It was the first time I had ever woken during sleep paralysis, but it was an experience I surely wouldn't forget. At the foot of my bed was a large, dark, humanoid figure. Its eyes were a piercing metallic red. Its face looked like a rotten and mistreated stuffed animal with razor-sharp teeth. Its body was the color of pure darkness and reflected the light that seeped in through my window. In its left hand, it held a large cleaver. Slowly, with a wide smile spread across its hideous face, the figure floated over towards me, its feet never touching the ground. Its grisly maw opened slowly, mouthing out the words it had for me carefully. Its voice was cold and metallic, almost like the sound of shredding sheet metal. Don't move. As much as I wanted to flee or cower in fear, I was incapable of movement. I was even incapable of tears. I wanted to cry out to someone, anyone for help, but I could only make out mere whispers. My eyes, however, were fully capable of movement, and I could clearly see this monster that loomed over me. It lowered its face within just a few inches of mine, and had its arm raised with a cleaver in hand above my head. I wanted to be anywhere, even in the pits of hell, just so I would be free of the suspense of having this hideous entity hovering over me. It spoke to me again. Count to 3. I closed my eyes and slowly began to count to 3. I could feel the breath of the figure above my forehead, warm and moist. I sounded off the first number. 1. I readied myself to say 2, but I felt the figure's breath coming closer. I wanted to do anything but to lay in my bed powerless to this being. 2! I cried out to the monster and felt it grow even closer. I opened one of my eyes and gazed deeply into the soulless stare of the entity that was poised on taking my life. Its open maw was close enough to sink its jagged teeth into my face. It grew impatient, waiting on its kill, and commanded me to continue. Do it! It shouted as I closed my eyes again in fear. I spoke aloud once more. 3! I waited in my bed for 5 long minutes, hoping that it had already killed me, that the suspense was over. It didn't matter to me whether I was in heaven or hell, just as long as it was over. Surprisingly to me that night, it was neither. After I opened my eyes, I realized that I was not dead, and that I was fully capable of movement again. I never experienced something like this ever since that night, and that night was one of the last nights I ever had a dream, nightmare, or horrific occurrence such as that. Since then, I have come to the conclusion for myself that the figure was likely a hallucination made up by my own mind. Some may say that it was a ghost or a demon, and I won't deny their claims, but I can't accept them as fact. No matter what I saw that night, I hope I never see it again. That concludes the story. However, there is one detail I always leave out. When I awoke the next morning, I found the closet door just in front of my bedroom and just in front of my bed, hanging agape with the door broken off of its hinges. I always close the closet door before I head to sleep. Not out of fear, but simply out of habit. I always close that door just to be sure that everything in my room is tidy and neat exactly how I left it. But the door itself was broken off of its hinges and just dangling by one of the broken screws that it was on. I never figured out what it was I saw that night, and frankly, part of me does not want to know. All I know now is that I have never had an experience like this since then, and I sincerely hope that myself nor anyone else has to experience something like this ever again.
"Lovely," said the beast, caressing Michael's hair. It perched on his shoulder, the flesh over its teeth quivering slowly. Michael hesitated. In front of him, a child's castle set was made from blocks and populated with small, plastic figurines. Several had started to melt under the heat of the small lamp that Michael had put nearby. There, it said sweetly. "Don't you like playing with your new toys?" "I don't know," said Michael. "Let's try a new game," said the beast. "Go and get the cloth blanket from your closet." It had been an unseasonably hot summer. The townspeople had also been visited by a steady rhythm of serious misfortune for several weeks. Crops failed, or the children became sick. The priest decried the town as cursed, before disappearing in the middle of the night. "You have all come to worship the Dark One," he had warned. Of the remaining able-bodied men and women, several tended to the sick and elderly still suffering from exhaustion. One young girl, while her family tended to her grandmother, glanced outside. "Look," she said, pointing upward. Slowly, surely, the entire pitch of the sky was going black in the middle of the day as shadows advanced from the distant horizon.
One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in a class and doing math. It was 6 more minutes until after school. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned and looked to the grass outside. It looked like a picture. When school was over, he ran to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so that no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It had a picture of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful, he wanted to meet her, so he ran all over the school and asked everyone if they knew her or have ever seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he was home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl, but unfortunately, she also said no. It was very late, so Tom walked up the stairs, placed the picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window, so he got out of his bed, walked toward this window, opened it up, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was gone. The next day again, he asked his neighbors if they knew her. Everybody said, sorry, no. When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew her. She said, no. He went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awakened by a tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly he got hit by a car. He was dead with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly, he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers.